Hello, and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection, the podcast that works to connect the world of behavior analysis and the world of education. We focus on topics important to behavior analysts who work in the public schools and those who support them. Join us and spend time gaining insights and ideas as our host talks with fellow behavior analysts as well as other experts in the field.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Behavior Education Connection. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I am so excited to be joined today by two guests. I have Dr. Dawn Bailey and Dr. Tyra Sellers. Hello, ladies. How are you?
Hi, so excited to be here.
Hi.
If you don't mind, Tyra, do you mind introducing yourself first?
Sure. Before I do, if it's okay, I'm going to just make a brief disclaimer statement that would
Absolutely.
apply to both myself and Dawn. So we both are affiliated with the Association of Professional Behavior Analysts. I am the CEO, and Dawn is the current president. And that means that she sits on the executive committee as well as on the board of directors all together. And so the Association of Professional Behavior Analysts, or APBA, has not reviewed or approved the content that we will be sharing in this podcast. APBA does not endorse or sponsor this podcast specifically, or the things that we're going to say. And so what you're going to be hearing are just the answers from Tyra and Dawn, who happen to also work at or volunteer a lot of their time, in Dawn's case, to APBA. So I'm Tyra. I'm a behavior analyst. I've been in the profession for a little over 30 years. Primarily focusing on clinical work, although I also had a stint as faculty at Utah State University. My areas of particular interest are related to professional ethics, supervision and training experiences, behavioral variability, and assessing and treating interfering behavior that really is problematic to an individual. So I think that's it. I've been a vegetarian since I was 12. I really, really love plants, and my favorite color is black. There you go.
I love it. And I will tell you, you can have all my plants because I do great with kids and animals, but man, I probably have killed almost every plant that's come in my house. So great. Thank you. Dawn, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, good morning, or good whatever time it is you're going to listen to this. I am currently a faculty member at Oregon Institute of Technology. I also am about 30 years in the field. I am stoked to be on this podcast because my very first job in the field actually was as a paraprofessional in a class for kids with severe emotional disabilities, and proceeded to work in schools until pretty much as my primary job till about 2015. And as a school-based behavior analyst, I primarily worked with kids on kind of both severe ends of their various disabilities, so severe emotional disturbance, or kids with intellectual disabilities that could not really be safely served in their home zone schools. I have been in Oregon since 2017. We have a master's program, and I teach full-time here and support our students in their various practicum placements, so clinic and school-based settings. And my interests are obviously the previous, and also I'm a big precision teaching nerd. Our university is actually the only fit learning university lab currently in the country, which is pretty fun for us. And we have a dental program at our university, and I do a lot of very random collaborative research with dental hygiene faculty. So those are the kind of funky things I like. I have 2 dogs, 2 cats, and 2 kids. I have a lot of plants, and they're only semi-okay. They're like alive, but my
Alive
picture,
is a good start.
yeah, but my picture app tells me they could be better. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you both introducing yourselves. Today, what we are actually going to be talking about has to do with being part of a professional community or a professional organization. And you all both are affiliated with the Association of Professional Behavior Analysts. And while I realize that you are speaking of your own opinions, I do want to kind of delve into why. Well, first, I guess I should ask, is it important for school-based behavior analysts or really any behavior analyst to have a professional network, professional community that they belong to? And if you think so, which I probably believe you do, why do you think that that's the case?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons that it's important, and so I think maybe I'll kind of start from the macro and get down to the micro. I think that when you are in a profession like the practice of ABA-based service delivery, whether or not it's in schools or in a clinic or what have you, or in an organization, right? Organizational behavior management, something like that. It's important for you to understand the infrastructure that allows your profession to exist and to thrive. And part of that is, and there are a number of different components that come together to make the infrastructure, but a significant part of it, especially as you are finishing up and then entering the profession and sustaining your career, is relevant professional membership organizations, because those organizations are engaging in efforts to continue to ensure safe practice in the profession, as well as the right to practice in many instances, maybe even expanding the ability to practice or to get paid for, to have funding sources for one's practice. And then that organization should be someone that you, or an organization that you can go to ensure that you're accessing high quality resources for your ongoing professional development, which is almost always required when you are practicing in a profession, right? Like that's one of kind of the requirements of a profession, that you have, standards to enter into it, and then that you have standards you have to maintain while you are engaging in practice in that profession. So I think like that's the big overarching reason, is that you should have a membership organization that you can go to support with your membership money, knowing that they're working on ensuring the safety and ability of your profession to engage in activities, but also to access those resources. And then through that organization, you have the opportunity to connect with people, right? Whether or not it's via the chat on web-based activities like a webinar, or at an in-person event. You can access those resources. You can see who, in some instances, maybe worked on those resources, or check references and then reach out to those folks. So you have the ability to connect in that way. And most professions have some sort of conduct guidelines or professional practice guidelines or ethics codes. And ours, as behavior analysts, we typically look to the Behavior Analyst Certification Board's code. And we are required to engage in ongoing professional development activities. And I think creating a community to help you facilitate your professional development is really important. None of us are going to be the best at everything. We probably don't want to, and we certainly shouldn't try to be. So we need to be able to access folks in instances that something might be outside of our scope of our own personal scope of competence, whether or not we're trying to increase our scope of competence, or we might not, and we need to refer to someone who would be appropriate either to co-treat or to turn something over to. And then, just like to have camaraderie, just to know that I can access people in my community to sort of say like, oh, this thing is happening in my state or in my practice area. Is it impacting you? What are you doing? Or to share resources or celebrate each other's successes, and just sort of be in a space where you don't have to explain what it is that you do to someone else to access support from them, right? Like most behavior analysts, you just like, you say like, hey, Dawn, how's work going? Dawn probably just has to make one of any number of facial expressions for me to know if I should be supporting with that's amazing, or like, oof, do you want to talk about it? Because we know enough about each other's practice, contexts to know that sometimes it is hard and sometimes it's amazing. So I hope I answered your question fully with those different levels. But if I miss something, let me know. And also, Dawn, I'm sure you're going to add in new layers to that.
I mean, I actually had a list and you hit every one of them as I knew you would. The only thing I might add is that because the question was particular for school-based BCBAs, and maybe districts work differently than they did in 2015, but I was always alone. I might have been assigned to a school or 4 or 5 schools, but I was the only behavior analyst at those schools. And so you begin to feel really isolated and segregated from your professional community when you don't see other people who have the same approach in philosophy and science and ethics code that you have. And so I think having a professional community like your state or national organization is, I always tell my students, you need buddies, you need friends. And so having buddies that you can go to that are doing really sound work and that have the same ethics code and values that you do really brings just a layer of, belonging that you might not have when you're a school-based behavior analyst and you're consulting and you're traveling and you might not have a home base. And we could talk about the ethics of how behavior analysis and school districts don't necessarily align, and so I think it's just really important for you to be able to find a home that's going to support you.
I think that's such a good additional point. Sorry, Selena. My first job in a school district as a behavior analyst, I was the only behavior analyst, and I had 56 schools assigned to me. And I didn't really know how to interact with school psychologists who were not behavior analysts, nor did they take a behavior analytic approach to things. And so leveraging my community was really important. So you're so right, Dawn, whether or not you're practicing in a different specialization or in schools, that context is different. And you kind of do need not only your buddies to have that same verbal community, but also maybe access other people that have been doing that longer than you have. So you can say like, hey, our ethics code is different. How did you navigate that? Or what did you say when the director of special ed said this back to you? So, but I'm sorry, Selena, I think I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. And I think it's a really great point. I was actually going to add, so when I first started in the schools, I was the first BCBA the school district had ever hired. They had never had one before. And I always felt, and I was by myself for a long time, and I always felt like in schools, I was a BCBA in a sea of educators. But then I would say on the flip side, when I would go to ABAI or I would go to a conference with behavior analysts, I felt like I was the only educator in a sea of behavior analysts. And I didn't now always feel like I belonged in either pot completely. And so finding other people who did what I did was really, really meaningful because I could say, oh, you get it. You get what I do every day, and you get how chaotic and crazy my life can be sometimes. And this is why I feel this way, or those kinds of things. So I think it's a really important point. I think there are a lot of personal benefits to having a strong professional community. And I think professional organizations are definitely one of the better ways to try. It's not the only way to build that for sure, but I think it is a really good way to kind of get your foot in the door. Because the other thing is, my experience has been most professional organizations are happy to have you. They're happy to have you. They want you to volunteer. They want you to be part of the organization and use your voice and say like, hey, in the field, this is what we need, as well as, hey, I know you're trying to accomplish this. How can I help move that along? I don't know if you have thoughts about that within your organization, but I have always felt like most organizations are pretty like, we want you to be part of this.
Oh yeah, we want you. We for sure want you. And we want you not just to be passive members, right? Just like Selena said, we want you to be volunteers. When we say, hey, we're looking for people who've done work like this, who would like to serve on a committee, we aren't kidding. We really do want you, and we want to hear what you have to say, and we want you to learn from each other. And this is slightly related and slightly an aside, but I think some of the smartest people I've ever met were just SMEs on different projects. And so subject matter experts. So anytime somebody says we want somebody to participate as a subject matter expert for something, I'm like, me, because I learn more. I think I learn as much as I give, and having the opportunity to participate in a meaningful way that's giving to your community, but where you find new buddies and you learn new things is really important.
And I think that opportunity also allows people who might not be in that practice area to get involved and learn from people in that area, either because they might want to expand or because they just want to be good professionals in our profession and know about how other practice areas are working, right? So I think professional organizations often have the opportunity, as Dawn said, to serve as a subject matter expert on a project. Sometimes there are special interest groups that are available. APBA doesn't have them yet. Maybe that's something that's going to come in the future. We shall see. But certainly being involved in that way helps, I think, your professional organizations also know who makes up their membership so that they know how to better curate the professional development experiences. What tracks do we need to have? If we're not doing tracks, what talks do we need to make sure we highlight? What sorts of resources do we need to produce to support folks in this area?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think being able to have that open communication, and I'll just put this out there, Tyra, you have been amazing to work with, and actually from a personal professional standpoint, to be able to say, hey, there's a lot of us who are working in schools and we don't really have a great platform at a national level. And APBA has been wonderful and welcoming to that, which has been wonderful. I will ask, because I think sometimes people are really hesitant to reach out to, like, I don't know Tyra, I don't know Dawn, like, I'm hesitant to reach out. I don't want to bother them, or I don't know if I'm important enough to reach out to them, which of course none of that is true. I mean, I say to people, I know when I present at conferences, I always put my contact information up and I say, I know people always do this, and I know that you're going to say, oh, she doesn't really want to hear from me, but I really do want to hear from you. And I think people are still hesitant to reach out. So what advice would you give to someone who's like, I really don't have a great network of people and I really want to build that? What are some easy, or I don't know if easy is even the right word, but what are some steps people could take to start building that network?
Tyra, is it okay if I go first?
Sure.
I mean, I literally just taught a class on Be a Joiner, and it's the title of the lectures, Be a Joiner. And one thing I tell my students is that they should just look right and left. Like, whoever is sitting to the right and left of you in that talk obviously is interested in the same thing that you are. And do it right then. Don't wait. Don't get their name and then say, oh, I'll find you in the app later. I tell them, do it right now. Turn to the people sitting next to you and say, where do you work? What interests you about this talk? And, unless they're actively on their phone, they're going to answer you, because behavior analysts are by and large nice people. And so it just takes that first, you're right, that first brave step to talk to a stranger, and then you'll have a connection. And I just think it's brave, but it's a tiny brave step. You don't even have to go talk to the famous person. You could just talk to the person next to you as your first foray into making new connections and increasing your network.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Dawn, especially if you're at an in-person event.
Right.
To connect with people and to look at the schedule events and see, besides talks, what other things are there? Is there a welcome reception? Is there something targeted for new folks that are just attending? Babbitt and APBA and BABA all do like a first time or new to conventioning sort of activity for folks. Or is there something in your practice area at a conference or convention? Like, for example, you all, Selena, your folks, your colleagues work to do networking sessions for folks practicing in the schools, which is great. I think if you're in an online, you can use that chat feature, and don't be afraid to say like, hey, could we connect? Could I find you on social media? Could we chat? I guess this is more of a maybe, not a don't do, but a cautionary note to listeners, particularly those that are newer in our profession. Exercise some healthy caution when you are in social media groups. It's quite difficult to accurately discriminate a lot of times who's in those groups, who's giving you advice. If you're asking for advice, should they be giving you advice? Are they overstating the sort of strength of confidence of the advice or information that they're sharing with you? Is there any opportunity for there to possibly be some ethics concerns with accessing groups like that, until you can really vet the group, right? So if it's a private group and you can really read what their values are, and you can look at the people that are administrating the group and feel comfortable, that's great. Honestly, what I would do is early on use what Dawn said, but use it in a digital context, right? So like, I have folks reach out to me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, that I don't know them, and they'll send a message and just say like, hey, you don't know me, and I'm sorry to reach. I really love the ones that say, I'm really sorry to reach out this way because I'm older, and it's still a little bit weird for me to get a professional connection, even on LinkedIn, which is meant to do that, just because that's not how I grew up. But they'll often say like, I apologize for reaching out to you this way. I didn't have your email. And then I can choose. I can say, yes, I would love to chat with you. Here's my email. Or you know what? It sounds like what you're looking for would be so much better served by connecting with this other person. Let me reach out and see if I can facilitate a connection. So just reach out. Just reach out as best you can, even if it's scary. We know we can do things even when we're uncertain if it's going to be met with reinforcement or not. And if you don't contact reinforcement for it, and if unfortunately you contact a little punishment if someone is rude to you, just understand that you don't know what's going on in their life right now. Try not to assign it to you. Give some grace and move on to the next person that you want to connect with. So sometimes you have to have a little bit of persistence. But for the most part, I think people are usually met with appreciation for a connection. So yeah.
I agree. And I would say, when I first started in academia, people would say all the time, oh, just reach out to them. And I was like, but they've published like 30 papers. Like, I can't reach out to that person. And finally, somebody said something to me that made me a little braver. And they're like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? They don't respond to you. And I'm like, well, you're right. I guess that is the worst that's going to happen. I mean, yeah, it is possible you get an email back that's like, don't ever contact me again. But I've never had that happen. And I don't actually know anyone that has. I actually think that would be very strange behavior, to be quite honest, to get an email that's like, don't ever contact me again. But, worst case scenario, someone just doesn't respond, and then you move on. And to your point, I think even with that, I don't assume ill intent when people don't respond. I assume they're busy, or they're traveling, or yeah, it just got lost in the shuffle of email. But I actually have had a lot of really good, I don't know if luck is the right word, but a lot of good experiences with reaching out to people and saying like, hey, I read this article that you published and I'm really interested in this and I'd love to talk more about it. Or I saw you present at such and such a conference and I would love to hear more about your work in that area. I know when people reach out to me like that, I am incredibly flattered. I'm like, you read my article? That's amazing. Or you saw me talk? That's so great. And I think taking that first step is the hardest one. But I know even Tyra, I hope it's okay that I share, but like I kind of cold emailed you and was like, hey, I have some thoughts and I would love to chat with you a little bit. And you were very gracious and said, yes, let's talk and meet and we can, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I really appreciated that. And it's turned into a great professional connection, I think, that we have where we've been able to make some cool things happen.
Absolutely. I think if we think about it from a behavior analytic perspective, like you need to create an EO for that person to want to engage with you or the content that you have to offer, right? And so like I wouldn't have necessarily known that you would have been the person that I should reach out to start talking about these things with. So I think you're absolutely right. And also when you think about like, oh, I can't reach out to that person. They've presented or they've published, like, yeah, that's true. And they've also probably had the same, if not on an order of magnitude, more rejections for presentations that they submitted and journal articles that they submitted. And, like, I don't think that because someone has 0 or 100 publications, there's a difference in value of what those individuals can contribute to our profession. So I think it makes sense that people would feel that way. And also, I think we're in this new evolutionary space with our profession where we're a little bit evening the playing field in terms of how we perceive people. Like it really used to be when probably the 3 of us could name, we could write a list of all of the, the big players in our profession. That's no longer true. Like we're getting really, really big now. And I think the degree to which practitioners are presenting and making a significant impact in public policy and things like that is helping kind of minimize that. I don't want to call us sycophants, but I certainly did that kind of stuff early on in my career where I was like, oh my gosh, look, it's so-and-so or what have you, right? I think that's happening less and less these days. And I'll be honest with you, I'm here for it because I think it breaks down those barriers. And Dawn, it looks like you have something to share about that.
Oh, no, I was just thinking that if you're, I don't know, if you're thinking of somebody in terms of I'm not good enough to talk to them because I haven't ever presented yet, potentially you could ask yourself, why haven't I ever presented yet? And then figure out what is it that you've got to say and then find the right venue. And then all of a sudden you've presented and somebody might want to talk to you, which is just another way I think of expanding your networks again and sharing what knowledge you've gained through your work and experience that's valuable and potentially really is going to help the next person, right? Who hasn't had an opportunity to hear that message yet. So be brave again. Put yourself out there because it's probably, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think there's some low response cost ways to do that, right? Like if you don't really know if you can talk for an hour, you could do a poster presentation or you could do one of the, sometimes like have a presentation where everybody shares a little piece of something. Those can be great, easy ways to kind of get yourself in the door a little bit.
Absolutely.
And honestly, serving as a subject matter expert, which also can come with like, but I'm not an expert. Look, subject matter expert doesn't necessarily mean anybody is like pinning a gold star on you and saying you're the expert in this area. It just means you've done some stuff and you have important experiences and knowledge and skills to bring to bear. Because I struggle a little bit with like the whole subject matter expert title, but I think to Dawn's point earlier, joining subject matter expert type activities can allow you to create these really great connections. And for me, several of them have actually led to publications. So, for example, serving on a subject matter expert group at the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, like in 2014, I met Dr. Shala Ali Rosales, and Becky McDonald, Dr. Becky McDonald, and that led to us writing an article that was published on ethics and supervision. So when you're doing that work, you're making connections that then can lead to opportunities to kind of make other connections and further your professional goals.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So I want to take this one step further. So now I've gotten brave and I've joined an organization and I've started talking to people. how do I get more involved in an organization? What are some of the steps I can take to do that?
I'm 100% certain Tyra's going to have ideas I don't have. So you've joined, hopefully that means you've gone to at least an online event, if not a convention. Then you've turned to the right and left and you've talked to and chatted with other people. Your next steps are to probably see if there's a place for you to volunteer. Maybe you don't feel like you're an expert yet, but you certainly have time and energy, right? So could you serve as a volunteer at the convention? You could meet people that way. You actually meet a lot of people volunteering. You become a very important person when you're a volunteer, and people seek you out like nobody's business. And so you might find an opportunity to meet with people that you hadn't before. I'm gonna backtrack on what Tyra said about being a sycophant. And actually, as a volunteer, I've met people who definitely modeled for me amazing professional skills in terms of mentoring and development. So like I'm from Florida. So as a undergraduate and early graduate student, I got to hang out with Murray Sidman because I was a volunteer. And the thing that sticks out most for me is that, do you know which papers he went to see? Always student papers. And he would go and he would find something really nice to say to the students. And so I saw that and I said, wow, what a great way to spend your time when you're later in your career. You might not need to go to every talk to get a CU or to learn a thing. How can you build up other folks? So just a side story on a cool thing I got to do because I volunteered, right, when I was young in the field. So it's oftentimes you don't even have to email to ask, can I volunteer? Because we'll ask. Organizations will say, we need volunteers. And when you see that social media post or that, email come through your inbox, just reply, just do it. Just be brave and hit the button and say me. Yes. Go ahead, Tyra.
I agree with all of that. And I think that if you have joined a membership organization, maybe it is your local state behavior analysis organization, or maybe it's a practice area specific organization, like for practicing in schools or organizational behavior management, or you've joined a larger organization like APBA. I think spending some time to get yourself familiar with what those organizations offer. And I mean calendar some time, because otherwise it's going to be like on your phone while you're waiting in line at the grocery store. And I don't know about you, but like my Shrek fingers on the phone, it's so hard to navigate a website. And they're often not optimized for mobile devices. So schedule 30 minutes and look around their website and get yourself familiar. Are there resources that you didn't even know were there that you can look at? And if there are, and you're reviewing them, if you have an idea that you think might make a resource better, look around on the website for some sort of contact form or info at blah, 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 email, and shoot them your idea. Like, professional organizations are doing their best to get you what you might need, but they're not in your shoes practicing every single day. So if you want to have an impact, not only on yourself, but on the entire profession, you have to give feedback to those organizations and know that they value the feedback that's given. So spend some time to become familiar with what are the resources, what are the events, how do you access those events? And maybe match that to the professional development activities that you have planned out for yourself. So if you're certified by the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, your research cycle is every 2 years. We don't learn this in grad school, but you ought to really be taking a functional behavior analytic approach to assessing your professional development needs. And when I say needs, I mean not only the things that you need to keep strong or to add, but also stuff that just fills your cup, right? Like fans the embers of your professional passion to stay in our profession. And so if you've done a good job of evaluating, you can use that information to start mapping out your resources that you can use for your professional development activities. And then, like, get active in the chats if you're joining virtual activities. Look for activities if you are a little bit shy or hesitant to just jump into an in-person convention and start walking up to people, maybe look for lower stakes opportunities. Like, for example, APBA has monthly journal clubs for all of their members that come with a CE, and always they are hosted by at least one of the authors of the article that is being discussed. That is a super low stakes opportunity to have a chance to hear from and interact directly with a published author, right? And you can put some stuff in the chat, and you can sort of start to build a repertoire of responses for engaging in these kinds of activities. Review the organization's committees. Those are usually spelled out in their bylaws or somewhere on the web page. And if you can't find it, find that email and email the organization and say, what active committees do you have? Look to see if they have special interest groups or something similar that you could join. If you're really nervous, ask some colleagues, are you a member of XYZ? And if so, would you be willing to tell me about your experiences and have you leveraged that? Or I'm really nervous, friend that I graduated with, about kind of building my network. Like, let's join together, and let's map out how we're gonna get connected and build this. Look for ways to bring it into your community. Are there behavior analysts that you're practicing with that you could reach out to and say, hey, once a month, let's get together, and we're all, for example, members of APBA. Let's get together. Let's look ahead and see what the journal club is going to be next month. Let's have dinner and discuss the article in advance. And then let's try to join the journal club if it's happening at a time that we can make it, right? So it does require some effort, but you are the only person that can activate those behavioral mechanisms to come in contact with the things that you need to build your community.
To that end, not that we're representing APBA in our comments, but Selena, I did share with you our events calendar. So if you want to share with people,
Yeah,
that
we can
journal
definitely
club,
put that in
yeah,
the
that
show
Tyra
notes.
just mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, there's also a really nice article by Becerra and colleagues specifically focusing on how to maximize your experience at conferences and conventions. And APBA also has resources for like self-assessing and then mapping out your professional development. And then we also have some resources around developing your community of practice.
So one of the things, oh, I'm sorry, Dawn, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say like a book club.
One of the things I was going to ask, and I think you've actually kind of addressed this, but I want to know if you have any other tips. There are lots of organizations out there, right? There are lots of professional organizations. And I think when you live in schools as a behavior analyst, I know I get torn sometimes between, do I join the behavior analytic groups? Do I join the educator group? Where do I fit? What advice would you give someone on how to make, like, what consideration should people be thinking about as to which organization might best fit their needs? Of course, APBA is always the organization, right? Everyone should join that one, which is what I know you're not going to say.
I really would love to say that. And all things being equal, I do believe that. However, that comes from a place of privilege, right? Of someone who I could afford to maybe join multiple organizations. And that's not always the case. So it might be the case that you financially can't join a professional membership organization. You can't join your local chapter. You can't join a school-based group. You just don't have the funds. And in that case, I would say still engage with those organizations to the best of your ability. Be familiar with what is available freely facing, because most of those organizations are going to have some things that are still relevant for you that you can freely access. You know, you might not be able to join CASP, for example, the Council of Autism Service Providers. If you are starting a clinic serving individuals with autism, you might think that's what I want to join. It's not in my finances right now. I can't do it. They still have phenomenal free resources that you can access. Same as an individual, right? Like, I'm just a person. I'm not an organization. I'm not going to join CASP because it's a trade association, but I can still access their resources. So the first thing is just figure out who's out there, who is in the landscape. And it's unfortunate that we're not teaching this in grad school across the board. What can you access for free? And then, I am all about taking a functional approach. So the first thing I need to do is know what it is that I need organizations to do for me. And what resources do I have? If I can afford it, I'm going to join organizations that I know are actively engaging in activities to protect my right to practice and to promote safe practice. So I'm going to join like APBA. I'm going to join my state organization because I know they're probably working either on getting licensure or keeping licensure. And a lot of people think, oh, we have licensure, so I don't need to join my state chapter because it's already done. No. Having licensure in a state just means you've got it, but now you have to maintain it. Licensure can get opened up and really unfortunate things can happen to the language in the licensure, or it can go away altogether. And so it still requires a lot of efforts, but also expanding coverage and things like that. That's stuff that your state association. So for me, I would say if I have the resources, what can I do to protect my profession? What can I do to protect my profession in the locale where I practice? And then what can I do to engage and protect my version of practice? I work in feeding. Is there a group I can join? I work in school-based. Is there a group I can join? Now, if I don't have those resources, then I'm going to think, okay, well, my money and efforts are probably best used closest to my practice activities. So if I can only join one, I'm probably honestly going to join the one that is relevant to my specific practice area, and hope that I can engage with them in a way that allows that group to also interact with the state, local organization and the national organization, right? So that's kind of my general approach. Like, what do I need? What can I get out of it? And where is my resource best used? But Dawn, I'm sure you probably even covered this in the lecture that you just gave around being joiner.
Yes. And I think I would add, again, just specific to the probable population of listeners, whenever I was primarily working in the schools and had opportunity for professional development, I obviously went to my state professional, I obviously went to APBA, because I did have the privilege to do that. But then I wonder, like, it was always in the context of what do I do most right now, right? So sometimes I worked with, within an MTSS kind of thing, right? And I was a member of a team and I was supporting an entire school's approach, right? And so at the times in my life where that was primarily what I did, then maybe I would look at school psychology conferences or PBIS conferences. When I was working with, in specific schools targeting specific populations of students within those schools, I might have done something different. And so I had my home organizations that I was always a member of, but on occasion, periodically, I would say, I'm doing a whole lot more of this. And that wasn't necessarily what I was trained to do for real as my big job. And so maybe I'm going to use an opportunity because that conference is coming to my state for once, and so they're going to be, an hour and a half drive. I could do that, and so kind of looking at, what we've been talking about all day, what are you doing and what professional support do you need to do that even better? And then kind of looking at your options. And so there's school psych conferences, there's PBIS conferences, there's there's direct instruction and PT conferences, right? So where are you really spending your time, and what do you want to develop further? Or how can you take some information to support your district more or your school more, to shine light on the awesomeness that is behavior analysis? So it's like yes, there was privilege involved and the ability to do those things, but sometimes you do have to pick, what do you need right now most?
And I have colleagues who will flip, right? So they're a behavior analyst and a school psychologist, and they might be members of multiple associations, but they'll do they'll do NASP one year, they'll do, a behavior analysis convention the next year. I think though, Selena, one thing to do is do your best to advocate in your employment context
Yes.
for support for professional development, and really point to your codes of ethics and conduct that require you to do this, and talk about the cost, and talk about if needed, that turnover in jobs is often not really linked to you're not paying me a high enough salary. Pay everybody a living salary, but I don't have the supports to stay engaged in my professional development activities that I need to. And so if you can advocate to have some of those costs covered, that sometimes makes it a little bit easier to engage in multiple activities. And ask your colleagues, right? Like ask Selena, what conferences are you going to? When you go to those conferences, what talks are you going to? What organizations are you a member of, and why? And I think having those conversations is really important. And because I don't necessarily hear those conversations a lot. And I think some of it is people just don't even know to ask.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I think you brought up a couple things I want to highlight. One, I do think when you work in schools, oftentimes your supervisor or the person who holds the purse strings doesn't necessarily understand the requirements of being a behavior analyst. And that going to that reading curriculum PED that you required me to go to is not going to meet the requirements of my licensure, of my certification. And so how can we make it so that I can maintain my certification, especially if that's what I was hired to do? I think those are really important conversations to have. I also really like your point about the state organizations. One, because it's the closest to where you are, right? So they probably have similar interests to what you are dealing with, as far as, especially when it comes to things like licensure or parameters around the practice in the state. Those are important things. But the other piece is that state organizations are usually a little bit cheaper than some of the national organizations. And so if it is a financial concern, I think a state organization is a great place to start. And you're going to meet people, and you're going to be able to be as active as you want to be generally in your state organizations. Because like every professional organization, they run on volunteers and they love having help and support. I think even, I hope it's okay to share this, Tyra, but even APBA being a national organization, you don't have a lot of people on staff who get paid to do. Yeah, I know. She's holding up the two figures, which I did know. She's got two people, her and one other person who's amazing on staff, who kind of run all the behind the scenes stuff. And so volunteers are really critical to professional organizations in order for them to function and do what they need to do to be supportive for their members.
And often, and is the case for APBA, volunteers get reduced registration, right? And for APBA presenters, if you submit and your presentation is accepted, you get a reduced registration. And many times subject matter experts working on something unrelated to the convention might still get a benefit of some sort of support to be at the convention. And like, if you're a student still, many membership organizations have really, really steeply reduced, registration and membership opportunities for students, for technicians. So yeah, look for those opportunities.
Well, Dawn and Tyra, this has been a really great conversation, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. Before we sign off, is there anything else that you want to share?
I guess I would say, specific to behavior analysts practicing in schools, I'm so appreciative for the work you do, as someone that did that for the bulk of my career, both as a district employee sometimes, and then as a consultant sometimes. It's really important work, and you have the ability to impact not just the students that you're working with directly, but all students that the staff that you work with interact with, which is just a phenomenal thing if you close your eyes and sort of think about that ripple effect. So thank you for the work that you do. And I hope if you are interested in APBA, you'll check us out a little. And if you have ideas for how we can do better, please let us know. And just take care of yourselves.
I echo all of those things. So thanks, Tyra.
And
Well,
thank you, Selena, for inviting us.
Yes,
well,
thank
I
you.
really appreciate your time and for coming on and joining us. It's been a good conversation. And I'm going to reemphasize, Tyra really does mean this invitation. So, if you are interested, she really does want to hear what you think. So, thank you again, both of you, for your time and sharing your expertise with us today. And to all our listeners, we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Behavior Education Connection. Join us next time for another great conversation about behavior analysis in the schools. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. Sending out a special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for supporting our work. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon.